And I think that's the power of a story. It's like the story we tell ourselves about about relationships, and like you think back to, and I think that's the interesting thing about Hollywood and a lot of the stories we grown up to believe, because the film either told a very, very, very powerful truth of the way it is, or it told you a fabrication, and then the fabrication became the idea of like how love should be, and that's not really how love is, right?
Right.
So
right.
Can you think of a film where you saw a film and you thought either one or the other? Can you give me an example of a film where you thought that was definitely how it is and that was such a great lesson, or on the flip side, that was a film that it was nice, it was cute, and gives you the warm fuzzies, but it kind of led you astray? You know what I mean?
The first one,
okay.
This is when a new film really hit me. I was 4 years old. My
Wow.
best friend's wedding. I cried hysterically.
You were 4?
I cried hysterically as a child. Yeah. That's
okay.
when I knew that films move me. When you see your 4-year-old child crying hysterically at a movie when Michael does not choose Julia Roberts' character.
Yes.
It was, to me, that was so heartbreaking because, again, watching that film, and again, I was so young, you're looking at a relationship and you're saying, oh my gosh, this guy is so in love with her. It's so clear. Why is he even getting involved with somebody else when clearly these two people have unfinished business? And you really think that he's going to leave because he's going to be in Julia Roberts' arms. And when you see that reality, like, no, that doesn't always happen. It's kind of like when you're in a relationship with somebody and in your head, sometimes it's just the way you look at it. Everything's magical. Meanwhile, the reality may not be that magical. You're just in your head living in this Delulu version of, oh, this is magical. We're going to get engaged. And then all of a sudden, something snaps and you realize, no, that's not what happens. This person's not really in love with you. And then all of a sudden your life crumbles because that reality just hit you. And it's not satisfying, and no one's going to be there all the time with like tissues hugging you with ice cream. I mean, it's just one of those things. It hits so hard. And how do you recover, or how do you learn to recover from that?
Yeah, that film was hard because I will tell you, that was a great choice, My Best Friend's Wedding, because that was one of the Hollywood films to memory, and I was much older than you at the time, but I remember thinking that it was a Hollywood movie without the Hollywood ending, right? But it was a real ending. And it was also about, gosh, there's so many, just thinking about the film, because I do love that film. It's also about what happened. It's also about pride, because she held back for so many years, right? Because she's like, I know you don't like the lovey-dovey stuff, right? So she was very much holding back, and she lost him. She lost him because she waited too long.
That pride theme, we can expand on that. That pride theme is a big thing. Also, the relationship between a man and a woman that is so close but not intimate anymore was pretty unique. Because I think a lot of people struggle with that, a relationship between a man and a woman, or again, people who could potentially be lovers, but they're not. They're just very good friends, and there's a fine line between friendship and lover. That was playing out that I think could be a bit confusing as well. What they were sharing with each other, what differentiates that between a lover and not. And then you realize, okay, they're not sleeping with each other, they're not intimate with each other, but he knows everything about her. She knows a lot about him. How does it make the new person feel knowing that your potential fiancé or potential husband knows so much about this woman, and they're so close, and they're laughing, and they shared memories? It's interesting. It's a very interesting look at relationships, what people allow themselves to be in a relationship. and also
Yeah,
what how it happens.
that's a really good choice. I think that movie was a really good choice because then also asks the question, it begs the question of can you be in love with two people at the same time?
Yes, which
Because
is
that's how I
very
interpret it,
interesting.
right? Because that's how I interpret it. Maybe you don't, and it's okay. We're we agree on a lot of things, but the thing is that because you didn't tell me if I'm wrong, but you see it as they have a relationship. Actually, I'm not going to tell you how you see it. Let me go back. How do you see his relationship with Julia Roberts versus his relationship with Cameron Diaz?
It's complicated. I think that there are two. Cameron Diaz and Julia Roberts both have different personalities, different traits. He loves them both, and I think he was playing us for a while of who he is and what is good for him. But in the end, you can love all things. What do you actually need to support yourself is the real thing that we all have to ask ourselves. You can be in love with 10, 20, 15 people because they all have different personality traits that you love. But how is it full circle of how can you give them what they need and they can give you what you need to move along in life in a progressive way? And in that film, I don't know enough about it, but from what you said, you can be in love with two different people. Somebody could provide the emotional support. Somebody can provide the physical, intimate support. How do you choose who is right for you?
Yeah, I think I would not want to be in his position. Let's put it that way. I was just gonna say because one is his future and one is his past, right? And the past can just have as much strength as the future. Yeah, because I don't think it's not a right or wrong answer. I mean, it just depends on who you are. Some people want the safety and the security. Many people choose that, right? Because your past is also not just about the person you're married to. It's about the family you've created with that person, and that also is a part of the past. And then if you move forward, you there could be the potential of losing that.
The fear of losing that, I think, keeps a lot of people in a situation. It's that big fear of losing something. And I think that's even going back to Best Friend's Wedding. That's what Michael feared too. I think there was a fear of losing that connection.
Yeah. I never really thought about that movie in that way, and there was a lot of things going on in that film, and you really rooted for. It's interesting because at the time, I remember I had a conversation with my buddy, and we were talking about film, and we had two different versions of that movie because I was rooting for Julia Roberts because you see her arc, right? You only get to really see her arc emotionally, right? Because so much focus is on her, so it's a little biased, right? It's like seeing one side of a story. You'd feel differently if you saw Michael's side or Cameron Diaz's side, But I was telling my buddy in my best friend's wedding, we were having a conversation, and I'm like, oh, that made me really sad. And it didn't end that way. And he's like, why? She was so selfish. she tried to ruin a marriage. She did everything until he couldn't. There was nowhere else to go.
She was a potential homewrecker.
Yeah, she was a homewrecker. She was a homewrecker. I mean, there's no way to, and it's funny because looking, if you look back now at my best friend's wedding, and the way you saw the film, when it came out in whatever that was, 97 or something, 97 or 98, and do you feel differently now? Right? Like, would you root for the same people? Do you feel the same way about it that you do now? Like, or how differently do you feel now watching my best friend's wedding versus when you did when you were 4?
It's so funny because it's so different. I mean, Would I root for someone who's a homewrecker? No. Was why was Cameron Diaz so bad? Like, I'm looking at it now with more perspective. Why was Cameron Diaz so bad? She was new, she was innocent, she was young. She met Michael at a phase in his life too. Why was I hating on her? Because she was ruining a relationship from his past?
Yeah.
It's so funny because, again, that if we look at life like that, then do we really have the right to judge any player in someone's story? Sometimes we have to know, why are they reacting that way?
Right, because you weren't there, right? You weren't there prior. If you look at the relationship of the people that are in our lives now, we weren't there when they were going through it. We don't know the other person's story. And I think it's fair to say that obviously we may have feelings, but we weren't there. We just weren't there to get the whole context. But when someone makes a choice to choose another person, whether wrong or right, that they have the right to make that choice. That person has a right to say, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And that's something I've always advocated for. It's something I've talked about with people is, okay, I know this is really hard to hear, right? Because people will use things like, but what about the foundation of marriage? And a marriage should, it's like I'm not condoning cheating or homewreckers, but when someone makes a choice and that choice isn't you, why would you fight for a person that doesn't want to be with you?
Exactly. That's a positive way to look at it. I think a lot of times we want to choose who's good and who's bad versus understanding why someone is good in our eyes or why someone's bad in our eyes. And I always said, if we were taught, me in my life, if I was taught that life, you will one day find someone that you love, and if it works out, if you both evolve together and grow together, beautiful. But if it doesn't, don't beat yourself up, because there can be someone else out there that will provide for you in a way and grow with you where you're at. I think a lot of times we are stuck on that good or bad, what's a good relationship, what's a bad relationship, without even understanding why that relationship is serving you for that time. And maybe if we understood life like that, then we would be okay with breakups. We would be okay with the fact that people do get married, they make mistakes, they could get divorced if they feel that's a situation they need to leave permanently. We are so fixated on what's good and what's bad and not allowing people to recover or evolve and adapt to a new way of being because of their life.
Right. So how do you feel about that? If someone said, because I know even this topic, even as the words are coming out of my mouth, I can just hear the comments, right, of like saying there's this commitment of marriage and you should honor that and you should work at it. If there is no abuse, right, or there's none of that, let's say there's no cheating. But let's say someone just says, I'm not in love with you anymore. I don't feel the same way anymore. Is that grounds for leaving a relationship? Or do you continue to honor the marriage and stick it through without all the, again, there's nothing else. There's no other person. It's just someone saying, I don't love you anymore. And I feel I'm not being true to myself by staying in this relationship. Because I think that can happen at any time.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not as tale as old as time or irrelevant as we think. If I received that, if someone said, I am not in love with you anymore, and I am not the person I once was when I fell in love with you, of course, the initial devastation ingrained in me would come out. But sometimes when you receive something like that, you really have to ask yourself, why did this happen, or why are we here now? What happened to make you fall out of love? Only because sometimes your own actions can create that disconnect. Like, where did the disconnect in a relationship actually happen? And is it something like, if a plant is dead, can you just rewater it and let it grow? Or do you have to plant this plant in another pot to grow and evolve? And I think we all have to allow ourselves to have those possibilities in our mind of, if this disconnection happened, how am I going to react? And is it going to be best for me and best for this person? Because we can't force anybody to do anything as much as we want to, as much as we want to control our marriage, control our relationships. In the end, somebody's going to be living inauthentically. And who are we to take control of how someone lives? It's not right.
Yeah, and then, but but again, the response being, you made a commitment to better for worse, to sickness or in health, right?
That's a tough pill to swallow. Yes, people do make commitments. It's very difficult because I know people will take this in a very wrong way, especially regarding marriage.
Yeah.
The commitments that we allow and commit to, of course, in good intentions, you do want them to be for sickness and health for the rest of your life. But I do believe there are gray areas to this, as there are in life. I came from a black and white family of rigidness until life presented me with things that were so colorful and so gray that you really have to go inward and ask yourself, what is the best way that I can live in this situation and help myself go through it without it being so rigid and so toxic? Because that's life. Life has so many avenues. It's really, really difficult. And sometimes you do go on one path and you wake up and you realize, this is not the path for me anymore. This is not the marriage for me anymore. And it could be recovered. It's really personal. Some people can recover their relationships. But if someone wakes up every day and there's this sickening feeling of, I am not living my life and I'm now causing health havoc on myself, is that worth living? Is it worth killing yourself, being with somebody? You're creating dis-ease in yourself because you're in a situation that you're supposed to try to fix, but there's nothing to fix because the other person is not willing to understand and hear you and accept the reality. Now you're self-sabotaging. Now you're taking that knife and you're stabbing yourself because you're not allowing yourself to do what you feel. And commitment, again, when you commit to somebody in both parties, when you're committing to someone in something like marriage, or even committed to having a child with somebody and willing to be that parent to somebody, you are committing. That is a situation that is permanent because you are having a child, or yes, you are creating permanence in your relationship to get married. But there also is possibilities and outcomes that are not going to be long-lasting. And I think if we understood that nothing in life is permanent.
Yeah.
That's a big thing I learned.
Yep, that's it.